Are you familiar with Strauss-Howe generational theory?
No.
So we had Ben Stewart on the show, and it was a really fascinating conversation. It's a book called The Fourth Turning, and they talk about how there's 4 seasons. Every 20 years, it's a season. There's the springtime, there's the summer, the autumn, and then the winter. And we are about to hit the winter season. So the way it goes is that every 80 years, there is a massive upheaval, violent war, or something like that, right? 80 years ago, what did we have? World War II. 80 years before that, what did we have? Civil War. 80 years before that, what did we have? A Revolutionary War. And so they're basically like, we're about to enter this period. I bring this up because everything we're mentioning, for those that are just tuning in or just jumping on the segment, we're talking about countries like Scandinavia. And you mentioned like after 3 generations of just, I guess, everything's granted to you. We have prosperity. We become weakened. And I want to show you the story from the New York Post. And I want to bring this up. Pentagon diversity chief reassigned amid probe of social media posts. Oof. I don't care about this guy being reassigned. I care that the Pentagon has a diversity chief. I keep hearing these stories about diversity, inclusivity, and equity liaisons and czars and chiefs and officers. Why do our businesses have ideological arms or employees? To me, I know it's not identical, but it's no different from the Communist Party saying, if you want to open a business in China, the Communist Party needs to have a position in your company. Here in the US, they're like, well, if you're running this company, you need to give our cult a position in your company. The Pentagon has it now? I'm sorry, man. We've weakened beyond, it's perhaps too late, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe it's not too late, but the generations that came before us were not paying attention, and they don't care. I've talked to people in the intelligence community, and they tell me leadership doesn't care. They just want to get home at the end of the day. They want to maintain the status quo. Whatever pays the bills, they don't care. So this is crazy.
No, it is. And the role of the Pentagon should be to train and prepare a force to be lethal and brutal to defend the country if need be. And hopefully that day never comes, but that's the only diversity and inclusion they need. They need to be as diverse and inclusive to the point that they will destroy any enemy that faces them. And the fact that we're pushing these sociological or psychological philosophies, that just runs counter to the goal of the military.
Diversity, inclusivity, and equity in terms of the military should be a diversification of armament, inclusion of different ordnance, and equity in the amounts that they have across the board to be able to defeat any threat. Not some weird cult-like ideology about, training soldiers that the Gadsden flag is racist, and that if somebody has it on their Facebook, they got to pull them out of their mission in D.C.
Yeah, military philosophy is legit, but that's the philosophy of combat and confrontation, not of how people feel. Not really. I mean, there is the hearts and minds battle that we're trying to win, and maybe some people think that by doing this, we're gonna get more hearts and minds on our side. Yeah. But it seems like it's rupturing the system when it doesn't need to.
I think we've been playing, the military at least has been playing the hearts and minds game for 20 some odd years. I was at State Department long time ago, spent time in Iraq, Afghanistan, as part of the Hearts and Minds War. And for 20 years now, we've been saying, well, maybe if we just work with the Taliban and build their kids' schools, and maybe if we send more of their girls into jobs trainings, and here we are 20 years later, and how many trillions of dollars more? And it's like, and how's that going for us, right? We can't get out of Afghanistan. Even Trump couldn't pull out of Afghanistan because the mission isn't yet accomplished. So maybe the Hearts and Minds game isn't what the military should do. Maybe the military should kill all of the enemies. And I'm sorry to say that. And then what happens after that? That's their problem.
Or
you're no longer a threat to us.
Like if they wanted to create like a global arm of goodwill and they wanted to build water systems and roads in all these countries across the world, cool. But if you drop bombs on a country, it's going to set the whole process back 20 years.
Maybe they should be building infrastructure, roads, water here.
Yeah, they should. And over there, just do it.
Well, they just did around the Capitol for the last 2 months. They built a great wall. It was as secure as could be. None of the crazy Trump
a big beautiful wall.
No Trump supporters penetrated the Capitol for months on end. So I mean,
they kept saying walls don't work, and they built a wall to keep out Trump supporters. Amazing. Well, Tom Cotton is doing something about it. Cotton introduces a bill to ban critical race theory teaching in the military.
My man.
Yeah.
Okay. That's very cool.
It's not going to pass. Republicans don't have any power right now. And what the Democrats seem to be doing right now is they know they have a very slim majority and they are pushing as hard as possible to gain as much power as possible because they know it won't last.
Yes.
Come 2022, the Republicans will take the House back, and then they will.
And probably the Senate.
In 2022, you think?
It's 50-50, yeah.
Are there seats up for Democrats?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, literally you flip 2 seats and that's all that matters. I mean, starting with Georgia, right?
You flip 1 seat.
Yeah, starting with Georgia. There's a re-election there because it was a temporary seat,
Wow.
right? So yeah, but I agree with you 100%. They know they have a 2-year window to enact as many things as possible. Obama did the same thing back in 2009, right? He passed health care because he knew he had one shot to do it. They had a supermajority. They had to get it done. They got it done, and then they lost.
I'm not confident the Republicans will be successful. I think there's a lot of people who don't like the Republican Party who only voted Republican because Trump was something different. He was actually trying to do things. You take a look at Biden right now. Mm-hmm. Did you see that they apparently rebranded to the Biden-Harris administration?
Creepy.
What is this?
Yeah.
I had a tweet about it, and I was like, amazing and inspiring. Despite every obstacle from racism, sexism, to not even getting a single delegate in the presidential primary, Kamala Harris is proving that nothing will stand in her way and she will eventually become president. She didn't get a single delegate. And now they're slowly inching towards making her the president. And it's right there in our faces.
Did Biden get any delegates in 2008? I don't remember.
I don't remember.
When he was up against Obama. He was a nobody in that running, though. He was one of the worst guys on stage.
In 2000, that's a
disgusting.
Great question. How soon did he draw? And I was paying attention those days also, but he wasn't. I think Hillary was Obama's biggest competition in 2008.
And Bernie's not Bernie. It was pre-Bernie.
Yeah, it was pre-Bernie, and I'm sure Biden, and there were probably like 3 or 4 other folks out there who dropped out pretty quickly. Was that also
Biden got 0 delegates.
0.
Well,
all right.
delegates.
A couple of 0 delegate.
Couple of losers.
Couple winners.
And then Biden got all this
winners.
free press being the VP.
Yeah.
And he got made. They would make fun of him and be like, "Oh, Joe, shut up." You know those memes where like it shows Joe saying something stupid and Obama's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that was real."
Yeah,
I think.
it really was.
I think critical race theory in the military it's the demise of the military.
Dude, it's dangerous.
Listen, what you need to understand about critical race theory is that it's not actually a theory of anything.
No.
It's basically just one person going, I've decided that water bottles are racist. And does everybody agree? And then someone goes, I don't think it's
dispute
racist.
it.
Well, then you're a racist for denying it.
Yeah.
That's all they do. There's like
Well,
no rhyme
define
or reason.
racist.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Ibrahim X. Kendi, the guy who wrote that book, is it How to Be an Anti-Racist?
Anti-Racist.
Said that he said the heartbeat of racism is denialism, and by denying your racism is a sign of your racism. I was like, and that is Kafka, right? That whole Kafka book, the trial was about that. Like if you admit it, you're guilty. If you deny it, well, only someone who would have done it would deny it. You're guilty. And so Kafka, how many dozens of years ago, 100 years ago, was like, well, this is where we are headed. And that's what critical race theory is. You are racist intrinsically by your race. And if you deny it, it's only because that is a sign of your racism. And there you go.
I think they did that with witches in the Salem witchcraft trial. They throw them in the water and be like, if she's a witch, she'll float.
No,
If
that
she
was
doesn't-
Monty Python.
Okay, that was a joke. But they're funny, those guys.
If she weighs as much as a duck,
Yes,
right?
that was
Yeah.
Monty
Then
Python.
What
she's a
else
witch.
weighs as much? Ducks float. What else weighs as much as a duck?
churches,
Wood.
small rocks.
Wood. That's
Okay.
right. So if she
Apples.
floats and she weighs as much as a duck, which means she's made of wood, she's a witch.
Was it
I
that they
love
would
it.
burn them alive, and if they didn't burn, then they were a witch?
I always
They
use
always
the
burn.
Throw 'em off a cliff. I don't know.
When the knight said a duck and the man said, who are you so wise in the ways of science? I reply often on Twitter with that when people
Yes.
like solar panels are renewable forever. And I'm like, who are you so wise in the ways of, I love that line.
I gotta watch that again.
I guess this is an issue of people who vote when there's no skin in the game.
Yeah.
You know, and so the
Absolutely.
challenge is, someone asked me about. They were like, "Whoa, back in the day, when people would vote, they had to be landowners because it was about racist white slave owners, blah blah." And I was like, I thought the idea was that they didn't have IDs, and so it was like you had to actually live there and be able to prove you lived there to vote. And so land ownership proved not only were you a member of the community, proved you lived there, and that you had skin in the game and a stake in what this vote represented. The issue now is, and I'm not saying I'm actually a fan of like universal suffrage, people having the right to vote. Well, I shouldn't say universal because I don't know what that implies. It could be anybody, like dogs voting or something. But I think there's a people should have the right to vote. Mm-hmm. We're in a different system. But now we have people who will like move to New York, and then after like a month they're eligible to vote for something ridiculous, and then a few months later, be like, oh man, this is awful. I regret that, and then they'll leave, and they just leave the place worse off. There needs to be something staking your vote, like and you in this community where you know that what you do will impact you. Otherwise, people can come in, vote, and then leave.
Yeah, like local, like waiting a couple years before you can vote locally. That got brought up a couple weeks ago. I like that idea.
And so then what happens is, remember, like in this past election, there were a lot of people who are like, I think it was Andrew Yang got in trouble because he said he was going to go on down to Georgia and help the Democrats win, and people are like, yo, and the Georgia Republicans were like, if you move here and try to vote, he was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing that. But it was actually a big issue because people can move all over the place.
Andrew Yang should run as a Republican.
Well, I think
he can win 2024.
He's running as a Democrat for mayor of New York.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, good luck, Andrew.
After having tweeted multiple times about like leaving the city and how he hated living in New York, and he, I mean, he's always had a condo there or something, but he lived outside of New York, and now he sees this as a viable opportunity, and he's like, yeah, maybe I'll run for
mayor of New York's better.
Mayor of New York, yeah, he'll stay in New York.
Republican president, because they want a populist. The Republicans love the people that went for Trump love a good populist, like energetic fireball of a personality. And Yang, I think, is. He's got more of a populist appeal, yeah, without a doubt. But going back to the voting thing, I agree with you in that we establish thresholds for things for a purpose, and by lowering the threshold, by dumbing it down, to put it pejoratively, does not do society a service. So we've made it so easy to drive now, right? We got rid of a lot of the driving exam. Parallel parking is no longer part of the driving exam in New York City. Wow. Yeah, the K-turn is no longer part. Well, are we making our roads better? It's like, well, no, we're allowing more people to drive. Well, I don't want more people to drive. I want driving to be something that you actually can prove that you can do. Same with exams, same with citizenship to a certain extent. And I think voting is the same way. I don't want to lower the threshold down to get the lowest common denominator in. I think we have to keep standards high. Look, we talk about this with, do you want your medical doctor to be someone who is like, well, I did the multiple choice test. Well, maybe I want your exam to be a little bit harder than that if you're going to operate on my eyes, right? Maybe you should pass a certain threshold. And we've lowered the threshold down for voting to the point that, like you said, you can show up to a state same day and say, I live here now, with no ID, no COVID passport, though. That's a little different. But with no ID, with no proof of anything, I want to vote in this election. Okay, you can vote. Why? Because that's fairness. That's not.
Service guarantees citizenship. Are you familiar with that? Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
Everyone brings that up.
Yeah.
See, I don't know if I agree with that concept, but it's an interesting concept, and I guess the author got called a fascist for implying that you'd have to serve the community or the country in order to have the right to vote in that country. I don't agree with that.
But it's skin in the game of somehow.
Right. I think there has to be a standard required for voting. And it was funny. I think I got accused by leftists of saying, like Tim Pool thinks that it should be harder to vote. And I'm like, I mean, it should be, to a certain degree, there should be a standard to vote, some kind of thing where we don't want people to be laying, on their couch, covered in grease, stuck to their sofa because they've been sitting there for 6 months. And they're like, I don't want to work. And then they get a letter in the mail and they're like, they pick it up, their mom throws it at them and they're like, mail-in ballot. And they open it up and they're like, I'm going to vote for this guy, and send it in. Yeah. Meanwhile, there's a guy who's overseas, got his leg blown off in Afghanistan. His vote is now negated by this person who does nothing, and he's risking everything. So I feel like there's got to be at least you have to get up and go vote.
Yeah.
And maybe something more. My general idea is if people want to vote, they need to choose to get up and go vote. And we even talked about this. I think Ian and I agree we should remove party affiliation from ballots. Because what happens is people show up and they're like, R, D. And then you end up with a bunch of wackos running the government, which is where we're at right now.
Well, yeah. And I think getting rid of lowering the voting age, the reason why I'm opposed to it is, and I said kind of cruelly, like 16-year-olds eat Tide Pods, and of course I'm joking. But we used to understand that, like, with age somehow came experience, came wisdom, came knowledge. And that can only, not necessarily, but it's more likely to have more knowledge as an older person than as a younger person.
Okay,
because of time, right? Because of time.
Brain maturation.
But hold on. Then that's an interesting point, because that still could be ageist. There's very wise 16-year-olds. Maybe somebody who started working the family business when they were 7. So aptitude test, how do you do it? How do you make sure that people...
That'd be cool if a kid, and no offense to 16-year-olds, I know you don't feel like a kid, but legally you're a kid till you're 18, could take a special test. If you're under 18
Oh,
and
I
you
see.
wanted to vote, you could go apply.
You'd have to
Take
do
a
it,
civics
though.
exam or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
I want to clarify that Tide Pod thing. Nobody actually ate Tide Pods. It was a meme. But one kid, as part of the meme, put the Tide Pod in his mouth as a joke. And then his saliva broke it.
Oh, no.
Oh.
And as soon as he tasted it, he and aspirated
lungs.
some of the pod
Oh,
and then spit it out.
Did
and
he live?
Yeah,
he's
but
okay.
it's permanently, it scarred a ton of his lung tissue.
Yeah.
He was not trying to eat the Tide Pod. He was jokingly
Joking about
putting
it.
it in his mouth.
Yeah.
These things are dissolved by water like almost instantly.
Yeah.
And then he went "Ugh," and like inhaled a bit of it.
That's
Don't
brutal.
put Tide Pods in
Yikes.
your mouth.
No.
Yeah, don't pretend like you're going to hurt yourself.
Seriously.
Yeah. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.